Imagine this, it's 48 BC. You're on a hot, dusty plain in the middle of Greece. And on this field, two of Rome's absolute greatest generals are about to rip the Roman world in two. These guys were once allies. They were even family, but not anymore. On one side, you have Pompey the Great, and he's got the full backing of the Roman Senate. And on the other, you've got Julius Caesar. He's cornered, he's outnumbered, and he's just come off a really ugly defeat. This wasn't just another battle. No, this was a fight for the very soul of Rome. And believe me, the way it went down would change the world forever.
I mean, you really can't overstate the stakes here. Caesar, this maverick general, had way fewer men, he was low on supplies, and his back was completely against the wall. Pompey's army, they were like a tidal wave, just ready to crash down and crush the man that the Senate had officially declared an enemy of the state. They were sure they were going to win.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did Caesar manage to turn what looked like certain defeat into one of the most decisive, game-changing victories in all of history? A victory so total, it basically signed the death warrant for the Roman Republic and kicked off the whole age of emperors. All right, so to really get what happened at this battle, we need to set the stage. You have to understand just how desperate things were. It's August 48 BC. Caesar's civil war against the Senate has been raging for over a year. And just a month before this, he got handed a major defeat at a place called Dyrrhachium. It was costly, it was humiliating, and it forced him to retreat inland with Pompey's much, much bigger army breathing down his neck.
So, how did we get here?
Well, it all happened super fast. In January of 49, Caesar crosses the Rubicon River. That was it, the point of no return. War was on. Pompey, who was the Senate's chosen champion, decided to bail on Italy and gather his forces in the east. So, after Caesar's big setback at Dyrrhachium, he marches his tired army into this region called Thessaly. And Pompey, who is being pushed by all these overconfident senators, follows him right to this fateful field.
So now, the armies are here. On the plains of Pharsalus, two very different Roman forces are staring each other down. And this wasn't just about who had more guys. Nope, this was a classic showdown of veterans versus recruits, a battle where the real strength was going to be measured in experience, loyalty, and sheer leadership. You know, this whole battle really came down to that classic dynamic, quality versus quantity. On one hand, you've got Caesar's legions. These guys were the absolute pros, hardened by years of brutal fighting in the Gallic Wars. They were fiercely devoted to Caesar himself. Yeah, they were under strength, but they were a single, disciplined, well-oiled machine. And on the other side, you got Pompey. He's commanding this huge army, but it's a mix of fresh Roman recruits and a whole hodgepodge of allied troops from all over the east. They had the numbers, for sure, but they just didn't have that same shared experience or that single-minded loyalty. And when you look at the raw numbers for the infantry, it's just, wow. The difference is stark. Caesar had about 22,000 legionaries. Pompey, he had more than double that, around 45,000. If you're just looking at the paper, that's an overwhelming, almost impossible advantage in the main battle line. But here's where it gets really lopsided. The cavalry. This is what Pompey was betting everything on. He had 7,000 horsemen. Caesar had a measly 1,000. That's a 7-to-1 advantage. This wasn't just a slight edge, this was the entire foundation of Pompey's plan for victory. So, with this insane advantage, Pompey and his top general, Titus Labienus, who, fun fact, used to be Caesar's most trusted commander back in Gaul, they cook up what they think is an absolutely foolproof plan. A plan not just to beat Caesar, but to completely annihilate him. But before we even get to the plan, you gotta understand the vibe in Pompey's camp. It was just dangerously arrogant. I mean, the senators traveling with him weren't just confident, they were already planning the victory party. They were literally arguing over who would get Caesar's prestigious job as chief priest. All this political pressure was really pushing Pompey, who was normally a pretty cautious guy, into a big, decisive battle he probably would have preferred to win by just starving Caesar out. Okay, so here was the plan, and honestly, it looked pretty unbeatable. It was brutally simple. Step 1, his huge infantry line would just stand there, like a giant wall, and let Caesar's smaller army charge and exhaust themselves. Step 2, while the infantries are locked in this brutal slugfest, his massive cavalry on the left would just smash through Caesar's tiny little cavalry force. And then, Step 3, with that whole side wide open, those 7,000 horsemen would just wheel around and slam into the back of Caesar's legions. They'd be trapped, surrounded, and then just massacred. On paper, it was a solid plan. But Caesar was a genius. He was a master at reading not just the battlefield, but his opponents. He saw this entire strategy coming a mile away, and so he prepared this quiet, devastating surprise, a tactical trick that would become the single most decisive moment of the entire Roman civil war.
All right, so the horn sounds, the battle is on. Caesar's legions start to advance. The two lines crash together. You can just imagine the sound of shields and steel. And then, just like he planned, Pompey gives the signal. Titus Labienus leads the cavalry charge. I mean, just picture it. The ground literally shaking as 7,000 horsemen thunder across the plain, a wave of pure destruction aimed right at Caesar's exposed right flank.
7,000 horsemen. Just let that sink in. This was supposed to be the hammer blow, the move that was going to end the battle, end Caesar's career, and end the war. Everything for Pompey depended on this charge working.
So, just as everyone expects, Caesar's 1,000 horsemen are instantly swamped. But they don't just break and run away in a panic. No way. They perform this perfect, disciplined fake retreat. They pull back, drawing Pompey's cavalry, who think they've already won, further and further forward, away from the main fight, and deeper into the little kill zone Caesar has prepared for them.
And this is the moment the entire battle turns. This is when Caesar springs his trap. See, before the battle even started, he'd secretly pulled a few elite units from his third battle line and created a hidden fourth line, an angled reserve of his absolute toughest infantrymen. Pompey couldn't see them, and they had been given very specific and very, very strange orders.
Those orders were simple, they were brutal, and they were psychologically brilliant. Caesar told these men not to throw their heavy javelins, their pila, like they were trained to do. Instead, he told them to use them like stabbing spears, thrusting upwards. His command? Aim for the faces. He knew that Pompey's cavalry was full of young, rich, aristocratic Romans who were very proud of their handsome faces. And for them, a disfiguring wound to the face was a fate way worse than death.
So just picture this incredible moment. As Pompey's cavalry is charging forward, thinking they've won, they are suddenly met by a charging wall of infantry. This breaks every rule of Roman warfare. The legionaries thrust their spears upwards, creating this terrifying forest of steel points aimed right at their eyes. And the rich boy cavalry, totally shocked by the tactic and terrified of getting their faces ruined, they just panicked. They broke. They fled the field in a chaotic mess, leaving their supporting archers and slingers completely defenseless to be cut down. And just like that, in one single, brilliant move, Pompey's greatest strength was shattered, and his entire infantry line was now catastrophically exposed on its left side.
And just like that, it was over. The reversal was instant and it was total. The very move that was supposed to win the battle for Pompey had instead sealed his doom. What came next was a complete collapse and one of the most one-sided victories in military history.
With Pompey's cavalry completely gone, Caesar's hidden fourth line wheeled around and just crashed into that now exposed flank of Pompey's legions. At the exact same time, Caesar ordered his fresh third line, which he had kept in reserve this whole time, to finally enter the main fight. So now Pompey's guys who were already tired are getting hit from the front by fresh troops and from the side by this unstoppable fourth line. Their whole army just disintegrated. The line buckled, it broke, and it turned into a desperate panic stampede.
The numbers, well, they're just staggering. They tell the whole story. Caesar lost maybe 200 men, maybe up to 1,200. But for Pompey's army, it was a catastrophe. An estimated 15,000 killed and another 24,000 captured. His entire army, the great hope of the Republic, had just ceased to exist in a single afternoon.
When his legions broke, Pompey just walked back to his tent completely stunned. He couldn't believe it. He eventually fled the camp in disguise and made his way to Egypt, hoping he could get help from the young king there. But the king's advisors, trying to get on the good side of the new boss of Rome, had Pompey stabbed to death the second he stepped off the boat. A pretty tragic and pathetic end for one of Rome's greatest generals.
So why does this one battle matter so much? Because Pharsalus wasn't just a military victory, it was a political earthquake. It completely shattered the main army of the Senate and broke any real organized resistance to Caesar. Sure, other loyalists would fight on, but they were never again a real threat. This one victory put Caesar on an unstoppable path to absolute power, and it slammed the accelerator on the Republic's final slide into one-man rule. The system that had lasted for 500 years was broken, and there was no fixing it.
And that leaves us with this final big question. With the Senate's army destroyed on that field in Greece, was the age of emperors now just inevitable? Did this one brutal afternoon seal the fate of a 500-year-old republic? It's a question historians are still arguing about today.